Okay, we're live. We're floating with a lug for it's a really weird lug, of course, because we're normally do this on Thursdays, but because of the holiday, we're doing it not only a week early, but on Friday. So that's the reason why we're doing this at a little bit different night. So hello everybody, welcome to the lug, and there's Drew. Welcome, Drew. We're gonna talk about containers tonight. Someone asked in the chat if we're going to talk about snaps and Flatpaks or DistroBox, and I said everything. So we're just gonna open that up and have a good time. I also need to put my phone on silent, so pardon me for just one moment. Otherwise, things will start keep beeping because my family can't leave me alone for 2.5 seconds. Um, that's just the way things go. Anyways, welcome everybody to the lug. So I'm gonna actually start us off here, and we'll jump off into a conversation um, based on that. So I have a very up and down history with containers in terms of like Flatpaks and snaps. I when I first started with um, snaps, they were really slow. Like it took a minute to launch Facebook, or not Facebook, but Firefox, like a really long time. And they have gotten way better since then. And Flatpaks I would really liked for a while, and then I went off from them for a while, and then I'm back with them now. The one thing I've really liked for a long time is like DistroBox and Doc, and Drew got me onto Docker, and I've been just so cool. So I think that containers are, for me personally, have been very interesting in a very up and down fashion, simply because uh, they have evolved over the course of the last 5 years. They were not great a few years ago, and now they're not only better but more useful. And I actually see a reason to use them. So, um, what say you guys? What's your guys' thoughts just in general? We'll start off in general on containers, whether it's Flatpaks or DistroBox or Docker or whatever. Anybody? Tampa Joe, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself. There you go.
So this whole thing for me started a few years ago. I bought a Synology that had Docker and 40 containers, and about three servers later, I mean, I've got the R's going. I've had Plex. That's the only thing I had for 10 years. But as soon as I got the Synology and learned what Docker was, I'm not an IT pro, but it was simple enough, technical enough that it took some work, but simple enough that I could do it. And the stuff I've got is I mean, I love it. I got websites, I've got, like I said, the R's, which I love, and I've got Bookstack. I mean, I started documenting everything, work, home, personal stuff. And anyhow, Docker, I love it. I tried Kubernetes, and I'm too stupid to get it running, but Docker worked great.
Yeah, I haven't tried Kubernetes at all. It's kind of intimidating. I don't even really know much about it, so I just kind of stayed away from it. But the thing about the whole Docker thing is it's been very much it feels very much like when I first started using Linux, it was a whole bunch of new exploration and new discoveries. I was always finding something new to try out. I mean, there's just a ton of Docker containers out there that you can try, and like there's sometimes you can just find something and you have no real reason to run it, but it's in a Docker container, so you might as well try it. So at one point when I first started my home lab, I, probably had 100 Docker containers running, and like half of them were like things I'd never ever used, but it was fun simply because it was kind of that new discovery type of thing. Um, Flatpaks were kind of the same. It was kind of nice to be able to have like a central place for like software or whatever. I think that like the Linux server.io for Dockers or Docker Hub is kind of solved that problem on the Docker place. So getting that all set up was also entertaining. So anybody else want to talk about their experiences with containers of any form? D, go ahead.
Um, if we're talking about like Flatpak, those sort of thing, I've had decent luck with it. I find it's handy. So, like, say you're using Arch, it's nice to be able to have that separation from your system, because some things in Arch can be unstable, of course, and that's in the nature of it. But having that side of it, that's just separated, you can pretty well rely on a Flatpak to work. You can't rely on it being bleeding edge, but it's probably going to work. So I mean, it's a short, sweet answer on it, but I've had good luck with them. I like them.
Yeah, definitely. There are some applications, no matter what distro you're on, that really do well with Flatpaks. Things like OBS is just a necessity in Flatpak. I mean, I would never install it from a repository ever again. Vivaldi's kind of like that. Vivaldi, for whatever reason, is really unstable in the OpenSUSE repositories. It's always having cache problems and stuff. So having the Flatpak version of that has been a lifesaver. Um, there's always things like that that are just work better in a container for whatever reason. So whether or not that makes them the future, and I guess is the question we're charged with answering, because if you were asked someone if like repositories of software like the Debian repository or the AUR, are those ever going to go away and be replaced so you can only ever get your software from, Flatpaks or Snaps or whatever? And the answer to that question, for, at least for me, is like no. I don't think that they ever will. But I think over time, the reliance on things like Flatpak will become more and more as like composable distros become a thing for more people, and just more and more developers will focus most of their efforts on putting their software in Flatpak and Snaps or whatever than developing 9 different packages for every mainstream distro. So I think in terms of the future argument, it's going to just be a slow slog into containerization for most people. Um, so as you can tell, I was expecting more for this topic. Drew, go ahead, save us.
The thing that I like is how quickly you can deploy something. And that is when you are able to like add a simple, a simple configuration basically, and boom, you've got something running that quickly. It's like magic, it really is. It's like magic. And I find myself actually not using it nearly as much as I used to, simply because I think you get into this like mindsets like, oh, I got to try this, and I'm like hip deep in it for for like a month or two, and I'm trying every single I'm trying every single Docker container that you can get your hands on, and like, this must be cool. This must be cool. But overall, there are certain things that are like a must that you should definitely use in Docker, but then there are certain things that I'm like, I don't know that I need to use that anymore. But overall, it's been such a like fun learning experience. And like I said, the simplicity and the speed of getting started with something self-hosting is amazing. Truly amazing.
Yeah, it's very good. Mighty Spirit, go ahead.
Finding unmuting button. Do you hear me well?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, hi everyone. Cool finally being in a Lux group. Feels cool here. Yeah, I would be actually interested. We could do a poll later. How many Flatpaks people here have compared to native uh, Linux packages? Because I have to say, Flatpaks are amazing thing. When I was still even on Arch, sometimes Flatpak was the easiest way how to get a software. So I mean, when it comes to package availability, it solved a huge problem. So not everything has to be in every repo. And yeah, I totally agree with Drew that Docker did the same thing for server. Now it's so much easier to get anything running if you want to self-host anything. But otherwise, I personally I stay away from Flatpak snaps or AppImages as I only can, because the hassle with teaming it's just not worth for me. I guess that was it.
Yeah, the theming thing is weird because so it used to be worse. Like on at least on GTK for GTK, the GTK 4 stuff seems to work. If you're in at least if you're in GNOME, um, the GTK 3 stuff doesn't work. Plasma stuff is very hit or miss, and most of the time just doesn't work. So it's weird that they haven't solved the problem yet, or maybe they just think that the light theme works fine and they'll just blind the rest of us forever and ever. Kat, go ahead.
I don't have a lot to say about it, but I will say that at one point, when I was using Fedora as like my daily driver, at one point I was using a lot of programs through Flatpak, and if I had an issue with the main repository with an app, in a few cases the Flatpak seemed to have better compatibility.
Compatibility with what? Like your hardware and stuff?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like my hardware.
It might just be because when you have a Flatpak, you're getting all of the dependencies and stuff right in in the package itself, and a lot of distros will compile. Like for example, OBS on Arch will only compile the bare minimum. A lot of the flags just aren't there during compile time, so you don't get all the features, or at least that's the way that it used to be. With the Flatpak, you get everything. Snaps is weird because a lot of that stuff is maintained by other people. It is on Flatpak or FlatHub as well, but on Snaps, a lot of times those third-party maintainers will compile things the way that they want them to do. I'm specifically looking at like the OBS package. At least it used to be where they had a ton of plugins and stuff. And if that's the way you wanted, it was fine. But it's not always going to be the best thing for everyone if you don't need all those plugins. So I think that in terms of compatibility, that's a good point. Being able to run something on any hardware or any distro, any setup you have is really nice, and it works. It's similar to the not only Flatpaks but basically any container. Like if you're running a Docker thing, you can run that on any system that you want to run it on. It's you very rarely is it say, oh, you got to have this piece of hardware in order to do it. It should work really well. Drew?
You know, it's funny when I saw this topic, I was thinking to myself, Docker, and that is all. And when now that Flatpak is like a topic as part of this, I'm like, I got nothing to say simply because I use 0 Flatpaks. And I know that I'm probably in the minority. Although I did put a poll in. If any of you who are in the lug here right now, there are 8 people that have voted, and 0 to 2 is 3, 3 to 6 is 1, and 7 or more Flatpaks is 4. So the majority of the people here are using 7 or more Flatpaks on their system. And I'd be curious to know, if you are using Flatpaks, what's your favorite one? And maybe if you are a Docker user, what your favorite Docker application would be.
That's a good question. Before we get that, Drew, tell us why you don't use Flatpaks. I'm curious. I don't think I've ever asked you.
Um, I don't see the need. Honestly, I just don't see. I mean, when I'm trying to think of things that you guys use in Flatpak like almost exclusively. I know, Matt, you use like OBS, for example, and I just install it from the Debian library, from the Debian packages. It works fine for me. I know that there are like Vivaldi are using that Flatpak.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm just using like Firefox ESR from the Debian libraries. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a real need to have anything that's containerized. I just install it directly from Debian. So
Makes sense. RBM?
Uh Man, so I am a container believer. I don't think that it's an exaggeration to say that containers are the future of Linux and computing in general. Because I think that it mostly mirrors the way that people want to use their computers, which is as like they really don't want computers that do everything. People want a console that plays their video games. They don't want a they don't want a set-top box that does 1,000 things and hopefully they can remember how to find their video games and there's no tinkering to do in it, for example. And containers are kind of like the software version of those like dedicated like devices. And I do love the general purpose computing, but the actual like the definitely the future is going to be in getting containerizing almost all of your experiences, because the sandboxing is, it's nice, but it doesn't matter really to the end users. Most of them don't have things exposed in a way that makes it dangerous enough to care about sandboxes a lot of times.
And it's not done well. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's not done well. At least with Flatpaks, it's not done well, right? Because a lot of a software, a package, or person who can a person who packages a Flatpak can give the Flatpak access to whatever it wants by default. It doesn't have to ask for permission. So it can have permission to get into all of your home group files. It can have access to all of your devices. It doesn't have to turn those on, ask for permissions. Like one of the premier features of a sandbox thing, right? Like on Android or whatever, those are all sandbox by default. And if it needs permissions, the first thing it does is it pops up and says, "Hey, this needs permission to access your camera or your photos or whatever." If at least in terms of Flatpaks, if it did well, if that would be the system we had, but it's still not. Snaps, I think, does it better, but I'm not sure that that's true or not. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, I don't want to take up a bunch more time, but yeah, as far as sandboxes go, it's a really cool feature of most or I think all container technology actually, because of the way that the architecture of how that kind of technology works. It's kind of forced to be somewhat sandboxed, and then you have to allow access inward and outward from the host, and like having that kind of granular control is also really nice. And sandboxes and containers make that much more possible. But yeah, you're right that the permission systems definitely need some work, but that's true without containers and sandboxing like that anyway. Like, just permission systems are kind of a nightmare in
Yeah,
general.
and it took Android and iOS ages to get there, right? I mean, they didn't start off with good permission systems. Eventually, I think that it'll get better, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's enough for now.
Okay. D, go ahead.
Generally, I'd say that I think most users will find themselves using Flatpaks or whatnot have you for their main software. Like I know, like for me, Firefox, desktop, that sort of thing, I keep that way because that's stuff I need. Or VS Code, whatever. I need it to work all the time. It will, but I also believe that Flatpaks will see them being somewhat the future, especially if we're trying to migrate to Linux being a openly used thing by people that are not tech savvy, because like the software store, that is so easy. Everybody's used to going to Play Store, Apple Store, and just hitting download and expecting, the average, say, grandma or guy that just got off work to have to go into the terminal and start typing out commands. So I'm on the belief system that this is the future. I don't think it will be adopted by power users, but for the average person, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Tampa Joe?
Yeah, I think pretty much it's like what everybody said. You had mentioned it earlier about I like to tinker and play with software like Docker. I've right now I looked, I've got 37 containers running between two hosts. I've probably had over 100. I like to play. But when I get rid of one of them, I get rid of it, and there's no dependencies left hanging around, and that I enjoy that. It's kind of like an app on a phone. You delete it, it's gone. You can play with things. Flatpaks, I've got more than 7. I probably only got 5 or 6 serious programs. Most of them are like Mesa and things that were installed by Tumbleweed.
Mm.
Freedesktop.org. I like to have the latest, being on Tumbleweed, I do get the latest, but like you, I've got OBS from a Flatpak. Why? Because it doesn't work very well and it breaks very easily with all of the constant updates. So
Mm-hmm.
for certain apps, I really do like the ease to you just plug it in. It's almost like, it's like an iPhone app or a phone app. It's really that simple and that easy to plug in and unplug. Um, and so I think it is the way of the future, unfortunately. And I also think, like, some of these immutable and Nicks and all that's kind of the way things are going, even though I really do like the old bang my head against the wall ways that I guess I'm stuck to.
So yeah, that's a good point. I have 15 Docker containers, but I'd say probably about half of them are like databases or things that are associated with other containers. In terms of Flatpaks, I have 34, which is kind of actually low for me. But again, about half of them are probably um, dependency things like Mesa, like you were saying and stuff. Yeah, and that's one of the things that bothers me quite a bit about Flatpak is that it feels like it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's kind of like the loopback devices and snaps. They bug me, but they don't really, matter that much. It's just a personal peeve. But with Flatpaks, if you do a Flatpak list and you go through, you're doing that every once in a while. Like you want to uninstall something because I don't use a graphical package manager store or whatever, and you just see like I have 4 Mesas installed. I have 2 open H.264 packages installed. Um, three or 4 different add weight of themes installed. Like it's really weird that you have that's the way they've kind of set it up. But I also have to kind of remember that that's not the way that normal people use Flatpak. They go into software or discovery or whatever, and that's how they're going to manage that. And then they don't see any of the nerdy stuff that I see. Kat, go ahead.
Uh, I just wanted to mention I I use Flatpaks for like just a couple things. Like if I'm using like there's the VR, what is it? It's like the program that allows me to use Steam VR. It's ALVR. And when I tried to when I tried to do it a different way, it didn't work. I had some kind of, I don't know. I use NVIDIA, and that already like causes some complications. But when I used I think they use Flatpak. I had no issues with that. And then I also want to mention that um, I'm not sure where this falls into the category, but AppImages. I've used that once or twice.
We could get into an argument about AppImages. I have many thoughts and feelings on that. GNU to Linux, go ahead.
Oh, hello. I agree with Drew. I have never used the Flatpak in my life. I've only been using Linux for about 14 months. So maybe I'll reserve the right to change my mind at some point if I see a need for it. But right now on Linux Mint, I get all my software through the software center or the command line or PPA or sometimes other sources. I don't see the point to it. I don't know what problem using a Flatpak would solve for me. It hasn't come up yet. Let's put it that way. I do have a few AppImages, and since you just mentioned them, I do like them. I use them occasionally for programs that I just want to try out, or maybe for occasional use. I like them because they're very self-contained and they remind me of a old school Windows, so-called portable apps. They're just easy to download and try it out. You don't like it, just delete it. It's like, it doesn't affect your system in any way. So I think they have a use, but maybe someday I will discover a use for Flatpak, but not yet.
Okay. RBM, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was not prepared yet. Well, I was, but I wasn't. I wasn't expecting that to be over already.
Okay.
But that's okay. I was regarding Flatpaks. I use a few of those. for example, I used the Steam Flatpak for a long time, even though it's unofficial, even just because my system has a technically dual GPU or even triple GPU. There's an iGPU in it, and then I have two old 1080 Ti's that have been running this thing for almost 8 years. So like Steam is very finicky about choosing the GPU correctly. And for some reason, it is fixed in the Flatpak. I know the root cause of it in most of the system packages too. It's just in the desktop file, but they won't fix it in the actual Steam package. So to figure out what was wrong, I used the Flatpak, and it was amazing that I didn't have to actually troubleshoot or debug anything. It just worked. And that's kind of the true for Flatpaks in general. Like we call them, kind of like portable or whatever, but the main thing is that they solve dependency problems. That's what makes them portable. And that's plus they still have like shared dependencies like you were mentioning, so it's not like every single container that you're installing is the maximum size of all the possible applications and plugins and bits and pieces of that tool or software. A lot of the like platforms and libraries and stuff that they use and build off of, those are just versioned and made into their own containers and then shared across Flatpaks, for example. So like I just can't see many downsides to it except for really the permissions issues, which is a problem of their own making because we didn't have permissions like that before.
Yeah. I think that for people who don't use them, the challenge to convince them to use it be saying, what benefit does it really get? Because especially if what they have right now works well, like if they don't experience problems with what they use as a native packaging, so if they get something from the Debian repository or the AUR or whatever, and that's just stuff works for them. There's no reason for them to go then seek out the Flatpak. So uh, people will espouse the technical reasons why containers are better, and those do exist. But from an everyday user's perspective, if what they're using works, getting them to switch, is something that would be a challenge. But I don't think. I think that when it comes to what will bring people to Flatpaks in the future, or of any containers really, will be availability. So eventually things will just be a Flatpak, or they'll be an AppImage, or they'll be a Docker container, and there won't be something in the AUR or the Debian repositories just because the developer didn't put it there, or maybe the version that's there could be really old and just unmaintained or whatever, and that's what will drive people to finally use the container. Mighty Spirit, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I would totally agree with that. Uh, but also, I was thinking like the two main selling points of containers or Flatpaks, snaps, AppImages are sandboxing. But as somebody already mentioned, that's actually already kind of done by Wayland by using portals and giving apps like separating all the apps from each other, no matter if they're containers or not. But the second selling point is solving the dependency hell. And I definitely think like that most of the app stores of common desktop environments, they're just gonna be more and more full of Flatpaks instead of native packages, and that's how it's gonna end. But I was also thinking that another way how people are trying to solve dependency hell is declarative configuration like Nix and Geeks. And I actually think that this is going to be the next thing that's going to grow together with containers like Flatpaks and AppImages. Because already right now, Nix has a number of forks, and Geeks is also kind of growing. And that's just different approach. Instead of putting all the dependencies inside the container, Nix or Geese are just gonna freeze the moment in time, so all the dependencies are there with no danger of conflict.
Okay.
Yeah, but I
Go ahead.
also had a question for everyone. Do you know anything about that there would be a decrease in performance when using containers like Flatpaks? Because I think that's kind of a myth out there, and I'm not sure if there is any truth to it. Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. Some Flatpaks for me run slower, but I think that's just because they're loading things that don't normally get loaded in the native container because for whatever reason. But that's not everyone. RBM, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that users need to be convinced that they should switch to containers. I think it's totally fair for people to just keep using the native packages that they're used to already. But I do like to refer back to the fact that there was a time when package managers and binary distribution was severely frowned upon. And if you wanted to run a system, you needed to build your software from source so that you could vet it and be certain of its safety and understand how it's going to work and how it operates on your system. Like, you're supposed to get familiar with this stuff before you install software. But we've moved to a point where that's not feasible anymore in computing. So that's like there. So like we're going to end up in a place where I think probably containers are going to take over the desktop because the distributions are just going to start using them with or without the necessary consent of the user anymore. Just the same way that they swap out packages and repositories without really asking if the user cares. Like, if a Debian maintainer is tired of dealing with an upstream developer, for example, on a problematic package, they'll just drop the package and quit maintaining it. And if you're a user of that package, you're SOL and you have to go find a way to get it yourself. So like, I'm not sure that we actually need. I wish that we could be more convincing to tell users why they should switch to containers, but I don't know that much of the value is in the user experience. It's really in the developer experience a lot of time. I think, at least for me, I haven't really gained anything except just, I don't know, simplicity sometimes, but only because I already am familiar with so much of it anyway. So I'm not sure that my experience coincides with a lot of other people either.
Well, we're nerds, right? Everyone here is a nerd. We're all Linux users of some form or fashion, and we care about where software comes from. The vast majority of us care, or at least have cared in the past. Normal people don't give a rat's ass. They're gonna go to GNOME software or whatever, and you're right. That's exactly. In fact, it's not gonna be in the future that this happens. This already happened. Ubuntu, all their stuff comes from snaps. People don't care. They just go to the snap store. They don't call it that. They just call it software, and they go there get their software. On Fedora, it's the software. I think they call it software too. All their stuff comes from FlatHub or Flatpak, and normal users they don't care. They don't know the difference. It's just as long as they can go to get Firefox or random app number 4, they can get it, and that's if they can get it, then they're happy. The only time they deal with how to get packages is when something's not there. George, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, does it matter? The only people that you need to convince are the developers, or the app developers who are doing the packaging, right? Like, and they've pretty much convinced. Like, the tipping point was, probably a few years ago. So, like, why would you want to convince someone who's like perfectly happy with their computer, right? If they're not like the target audience for the thing, you know? I guess, yeah, I guess I'm just tossing another question back at you. Sorry.
Well, it's just when I was thinking of convincing, I was more thinking of the Drews of the world, like people who are longtime Linux users who do things from a native packaging perspective, trying to think. But you're right. There's no reason to convince them as long as what they're doing work. What will happen is eventually over time, you know, if more and more developers focus on Flatpak or Snaps or whatever, Packages will just be there, and if you want them, that's where you go get them. If you don't, if you don't want to use those things, then you just won't use the package. Tampa Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, the whole notion of reviewing the source. I'm not really a programmer. I've written code in Perl back in the day when I used to dabble a little bit more. I play around with things now, but I don't even think a full-fledged developer can go through the thousands of packages of code. That's why I do prefer to use I like Tumbleweed, and I do prefer to use the OpenSUSE repositories because there are people going through it. Does that mean something's gonna not get through? No, but there are a lot of people that are maintaining that stuff for OpenSUSE, and I do prefer that. I have ran a few Flatpaks, and I put pasted something in there about only Office. That is the only thing that I consider sketchy that I have installed, and I haven't actually opened it up recently. And I did it because I think it was your podcast where you had mentioned you installed it because I was waffling. I'm like, man, I want it. It looks like Excel, and I use Excel and Word at work, and this looks like it, but it's written by some Russian dudes, and I don't know, it looks sketchy. And that's the only thing I've installed that I think is kind of sketchy. Everything else, I'm really I don't put app images on. Not that I don't trust them, but um, I believe security starts with you. When I'm at work, I don't log into my bank on my work computer because I don't know what's between the keyboard and my bank server. I'll do it at home, and if I really need to do it at work, I'll pull my phone out and VPN to my home to do it. But I don't want to say I'm paranoid, but I try not to play around with too much junk. Docker's the exception. It's the Wild West, and I run it as root, but that's on machines that aren't my laptop and my primary machines that I use. But anyhow, that's all I got to say on that.
See, I'm exactly the opposite. I will go into the open build service and literally install whatever I want. I don't care. Just bring it on. Security schmurity. RBM, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think in computing we've just there's so much software, like you just can't review it anymore. There's no individual in the world who can keep up with that. So instead, the situation becomes about trust factors and who you trust to provide you that software. And it's very, very, very easy to trust the Debian maintainers for the software that they package and the way that they provide it to you. Even I guess Ubuntu still, presumably, I haven't really heard any different about them lately. But Fedora and Arch and all the way that like everybody's pretty comfortable trusting them with their packaging. But there's so much burden that this introduces on the packagers as well. Do you know the like every piece of software has a GitHub repository with a chart on it, a table that has a compatibility list of every distro that they're available on and what versions it is? Like they'll get in depth with this stuff. And man, how many of those cells are just red, outdated, security problems, CVE, red, outdated, and then there's just like one like Void Linux or something has the brand newest version that's totally safe today. Like that problem is like we've only just multiplexed that problem by creating more distributions. It's just more work for everybody for no real gain. With these containers, it's actually so much easier for a developer to package their own software with their own build system. They already have to build it anyway. Why don't we just take it from them?
Well, if only the developers would do it. I'm looking at you, DaVinci Resolve. Do it to it, man. Tulip, go ahead. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Linux audio problems. Every lug doesn't seem to. I don't think we've gone a single one without. Well, if you get that fixed, Tulip, we'll come back to you. Mighty Spirit, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if everything's gonna end up at on FlatHub, I'm just thinking, wasn't it the thing that some part of FlatHub was proprietary?
No, that's Snaps.
Okay. But then I'm still thinking, who owns FlatHub and who's gonna have hands-on control or have an option to put a paywall on distribution of packages if everything's gonna get centralized on FlatHub?
In traditional Linux fashion, everything goes down to Red Hat. RBM, go ahead.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you'll technically be able to see that the bottom of the stack will be Red Hat again. Um, but FlatHub, you can host your own repository, just like host your own package repository for Debian or whatever. You can build your own FlatHub repository. There are some, I believe, that are hosted, that like most of the index is hosted on like GitHub or something. And there's just like a small wrapper around that for a FlatHub repository. I can't 100% say that. I could have also partially imagined that part, but I do know that it is possible for you to run your own. So at the end of the day, that's what's nice, and that's one of the main problems that we have with Ubuntu's snaps is that you can't run your own snap registry. It's proprietary, as far as I can remember. I hope that has. I hope I'm not wrong now, but maybe.
I think you can. I think it's the back end for that individual store that's proprietary, but I might be wrong. Nobody uses snaps outside of the
Right.
Ubuntu world. Like it is very like everywhere. Everyone else is Flatpak at the moment. It's
Yeah.
just so.
It
Uh,
was at least a major. It was at least a major like point of contention a while back, and I just don't know what the resolution of that ever ended up being.
I don't think that there was one, to be honest.
But I won't jump into a second topic from this chat now.
Uh, Mishka, go ahead.
Well, part of what I was going to say might dip into the second half, but I think where a lot of the Flatpak stuff is going, because I've done a lot of distro hopping before, I don't have an in-depth knowledge on a lot of the distros that are out there, but just from what I've seen, there's a trend that's happening that these distros that are trying to be more user friendly for new users, they have their own like little storefront and stuff like Gnome Store or Gnome Software. And so these distros will add their own repositories that have things that, they support and develop that's on the store. And then you also have Flatpaks as an option. And so I think like for ease of use of new users to Linux, Flatpak is definitely the way forward. And I forgot the second half. My mind just swirled.
That's okay. RBM, go ahead.
So I wanted to take a moment to address some of the other cool stuff that maybe would convince users to take up containers. Uh, if you are into tinkering around and stuff, they're obviously amazing for that because you can have so many instances of the same container and just have and do so many things with that. That's really cool. Run multiple reverse proxies on the same system and like load balancers and all kinds of stuff. You don't even have to have a bunch of hardware anymore. You can multiplex all of this stuff on just your laptop now with the ease of access of Docker Compose files. So like it's so nice that you can just do those things and experiment that way now. But additionally, once you start using containers, they're super easy to pack up the container you're using and then just punch that over to another piece of hardware anywhere in the world, which comes in handy really nice when you're doing a bunch of testing across like different hosts or something, and you need to set up the same thing and have an experiment with this software in 10 different places. You can test that exact same container setup in 10 different places across 10 different hosts in a matter of minutes. All it takes is like 2 commands and the time to send the data around. So it's just I just don't know that there's anything for like your so-called average end user that's on the desktop though. Like it doesn't.
The thing is that they're already using Flatpak or snaps if they're on Ubuntu, right? They don't
Yeah,
they
to
don't
some extent.
right they don't it's wherever their distro gets packages from, that's where they're going to get it from, and that they couldn't tell you the difference between
Yeah,
a Flatpak or a snap, right?
pretty much. So the one thing that I wanted to end with on that was that Drew asked about some favorite containers, and I wanted to throw out two from that are actually my two of my favorite containers because of the Docker Compose setups that they provide, which is probably my favorite feature of Docker now. The two projects are Open Project and Nextcloud. The all-in-one containers for both of those provide so much utility and so much stuff. And all you have to do is set like a couple of environment variables and maybe put like a reverse proxy in front of it for SSL. So that you can host it with your host name or whatever, and you have all of the like amazing extras, including like collaborative, like Nextcloud. You could get the all-in-one. It has the collaborative editing suite or whatever just built into it also, and plus the file management and plus the bookmark management and I don't know all the other plugins and stuff that you can think of. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Tulip, did you get your audio fixed?
I believe so. Can you
Yeah,
guys hear?
yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, all right. There you go. So I do consider myself a developer too, and so like Flatpaks honestly are a wonderful technology. Like I don't really do graphical applications much, but whenever I need to edit something or just I don't know do something, having everything under Flatpak is just so much easier. Like I can just set the runtime and everything, and bam, there you go. And also about the how can I say it? About the distribution. Like I personally like Flatpak a lot more because I can just distribute stuff straight to the users. Like I don't need to go through any distro packaging or anything. Like for example, you know the bottles Flatpak, like the wine runner.
Hmm.
Recently, they got into some kind of controversy with the OpenSUSE packagers that patched out the donate button for them, and that's very concerning. I just think it would be best for them to just use the Flatpak and that's it. You know, I don't know.
Uh,
That's it.
on the OpenSUSE thing, uh, the developers and community leads behind OpenSUSE, they have a tendency to stick their foot in shit all the time, for random reasons. Like there are donate buttons all over the place. If they were really opposed to that, Thunderbird wouldn't be in the repositories. Firefox wouldn't be in the repositories. So it really stupid. RBM, go ahead.
That you reminded me about another thought or question that I had about if how many developers we actually do have here, and how many of you have used containers in your development cycle to for like your workflow, and when you have uh, you can because you could define like a container where your editor and your whole project lives inside of. So like you could have all of them running like every Next.js app, for example, runs on port 3000 or React app does. I don't know which one. Port 3000. So like you can't look at two of them at the same time without learning how to go do this and that to wire them all up correctly together. But can just have all of them running at the same time because they only have their ports inside the container, and then you can have your share the entire editing environment inside that container file with other developers who can have the exact same environment as you. Has anybody been into that before?
It's hilarious that George is going next. George, go ahead.
Yes, but that's not what I wanted to. I raised my hand so much long ago, I forgot. hold on, let me table that. But Matt, I just want to say something here. I know it's going to piss off a lot of people. Okay. Anybody here on the OpenSUSE bottles thing? Does anybody else think it's weird that a third party can just grab an application's app and modify it and distribute it, and you're okay with that? Nobody else thinks that's weird?
It happens all the time on Arch, like all the time. Like in order to be.
So my question for the group is we're not talking about just like containers and Flatpaks. We're talking about how the distro model is just backwards for the desktop, right?
Use Bluefin, right?
No. What I'm saying is like this has nothing to do with distribution. I'm talking about the model, right? The whole idea, right, that this Debian is going to scale forever, like hasn't worked, right? And at some point, the finances and the money just runs out. RHEL just announced in RHEL 10 on their enterprise distro, the most distro of distros, the oldest school you can get. They're going with Flatpaks for all their graphical apps. They removed them from CentOS, right? They're not even waiting for Fedora anymore because they're switching to Flatpaks for the same reason Canonical switched to Snaps. They don't want to package Firefox 50,000 times. And at the end of the day, they have all the money. We're enthusiasts. The second piece is the most traditional, the closest thing to a traditional Linux on a device that has been successful, that isn't like Android and all the other better Linuxes. Yeah. Is Flatpak only, right? Because why? If Valve wanted to put out a thing that had a desktop as a backup on a handheld device, right? Are they going to pay for a bunch of developers to get the app? You know, are they going to try to figure out, you know, oh, don't worry, all the Steam Deck users are going to learn how to use the AUR? No, they're just going to say, screw it, bolt on Flatpak, and you're done. That's it. Then they could concentrate on what they need to do, right? So that drives the cost of developing distros like way down, right? That means any idiot on the internet can take a thing and bolt the most valuable thing that Linux provides is those applications in a way that they can consume it. So anyway, that was my pitch. Sorry, I didn't want to get all preachy and stuff.
It's okay. I think it brings up the. I mean, you know, you could get into the distro model itself, right? And you know, I've talked about this before.
Yeah.
If you remove the need for traditional package management, what is the reason behind all the distros?
That is a great question.
Right. Okay.
There isn't exactly. Now you know what distroless is, man.
Yeah.
No,
I got
but
you.
just one thing you did remind me of. So, am I being too loud? Is my mic too high?
No, you're fine.
I feel like I'm yelling. What were you just saying before? Your first response. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, hell if I know. I don't remember either. Can't ask a man with no memory what he says.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, like it really is about the economics of the Linux desktop, right? Like how many Debian developers do you think it would take to keep packaging, and what do they have to do every 2 years? Upgrade them all. And we're users. Most people aren't paying for their Linux, hoping that every one of those 40,000 packages will come out with an operating system at the end, right? And that kind of slows everything down. So that's why everyone's like kind of speeding up and trying to kind of remove those barriers from that, because they're sick of paying, you know.
Well, if Universe went all Flatpaks, that'd be.
I've been on Flatpak for like 4 years. There's no piece of software that I can't run with DistroBox and a Flatpak or whatever, and I have the latest versions of everything. So, like, to me, when I asked earlier, like, what do the users care? You know, they're not going to care. I'm going to click on the graphical store and I need Firefox, and it better be the latest version. And if I'm on a distro package, not as fast as I would like it to be, right? And then they're going to wonder why desktop Linux is kind of like the weird one, you know? I get the latest version on another Linux, Firefox, on my Android Linux phone faster than my traditional Linux. That sucks. Like, people hate that. I want it from Mozilla. So I think users just expect that more these days, you know, versus before it was like, nope, I want that version of Bash to be seen by like 15 different developers, you know, and that's why the version in Bash and Debian is like so old. So, you know, anyway, I think it's about the distro model just shifting more towards this, you know, and mobile server cloud kind of layout where it's like, I want a core OS that's simple, and I want an app store. Give me that, and people like us end up arguing about how to give them that all night, which is like what we're doing.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Always welcome. Tampa Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm an OpenSUSE user, and I'm gonna throw my opinion, and it's not worth anything. But I saw that thing about the removing the button, and I in principle I don't like it because I think they should be supporting, but I haven't actually heard the reasoning why they did it. I'm not thinking it's malicious. I saw a post, and it might have been on Reddit. I don't remember where, that basically the bottles people asked OpenSUSE, hey, just remove it because we don't want to support distro versions. We only want to support the Flatpak. And this may have been in response to that, and I don't know if it was like a, hey, let's remove this so they can't come get support. I don't know that it was malicious. So I'm coming at it with, it seems a little sus, but I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I haven't heard why. But to my earlier comment about, I'm kind of careful about what I install. I'm not against Flatpaks at all. I love the concept, and I look at where they come from because there's a lot. Like I got KDE, and when I go into that store, there's things that I don't even know who this person is. On GitHub, at least I can go look, see how active it is, see how many maintainers there are, and things like that, which kind of give me a good feeling about what I'm about to install. But with Flatpaks, like I installed OBS, I installed the Steam one, because I trust the companies that are putting them out. So I I think Flatpaks are the way to go. For instance, I use AutoCAD for my, that's how I make a living, and they've never had a Linux one, but and I know why, because you don't want to support a Red Hat, an Arch, Debian, 28 different versions. But if they ever are to if a lot of these big companies that are making these packages that keep us on Windows are to ever step over to Linux, it's going to be because something as simple as a Flatpak, where they create one package that just works for everyone. None of them are going to want to jump into the 12 different variants for 12 different distros bandwagon. They're all going to want to look, here's one Flatpak, you run this Flatpak, and as long as you're on this kernel version or higher, I imagine the kernel version matters, but dependencies they can package in. So I do think Flatpak is kind of the way things are going to be going. To make it simple for larger developers to get involved and not have to. I mean, can you imagine if you were on a support team for Steam and you didn't have a Flatpak, and oh, what version of this are you running? What version of that? I mean, it would just be a nightmare. And so, in principle, I think it's actually going to be a savior, but right now it's kind of the Wild West, and buyer beware.
So just on that point of the Steam thing, before Steam had the official Flatpak version, their official version of Steam was for Ubuntu. And if you wanted support, you used Ubuntu. If you were on a different distro, you didn't get support. That's just the way that it was. And actually, I think that it's only fairly recently that Flatpak became the official version of Steam. RBM, go ahead.
I don't know if Flatpak still is official for Steam. I would have to double check that, to be honest, because I know that it was unofficial just like a few weeks ago.
There you go. George is
It's
shaking his head
unverified,
no.
I think. It's unverified, I think, still. And I'm not sure that Valve is working on it too much either at this point in time. But I did touch on the distro model, actually, like George was talking about earlier, to an extent, but it was from a different angle, where I was talking about the chain of trust, where you obviously trust the software developer when you're running the software that they developed on your system. But how much more do you extend that chain of trust to the packagers of the distributions as well? Like Debian, I think it's easy to go ahead and trust that, but even still, like backports are Debian maintainers taking patches from upstream and pushing and like pulling them from upstream on newer versions of software and punching them into older versions of software without actually updating the software itself. Like that's honestly, that's mangling the developer's code in a way that is not necessarily conducive with upstream and the developer themselves. So like I think that was already a problem, but it was one that was easy to brush under the rug. But when you look at it from the other angle that George brought in too, like I think it is pretty diabolical overall. And I think it's more respectful of the developers to just let them package their own software and distribute it themselves too.
Well, I think I agree with that, but I think so. There's a lot of examples of distributions doing weird things with packages that they don't own. Um, Arch pushing the Git version of Grub for years and years. You know, they do that. I mean, yeah, they weren't modifying anything, but they're pushing. The Grub developers themselves have talked to Arch many times and say, "Hey, push the stable version, not the Git version." But they don't. They didn't do it for a long time. I don't know if that's been fixed now or not. But I know I always harp on the Arch guys, but there's so many examples of the Arch repo maintainers or whatever messing with packages. OBS is one of them. Grub, several different examples of them just really doing weird things with the way that they package some of their software, and because they have specific guidelines in order to be in core versus being in one of the other repositories, and if they want something in one place or the other and they have to compile it in order for it to qualify, they just do it. And I think a lot of distros have ways that they envision things being done, and that leads you into situations where OpenSUSE does stupid things every once in a while too. It's one of the reasons why OpenSUSE is 2 versions behind on the NVIDIA drivers, is because they follow a different stream than literally every other rolling release distro. Right? It's they have ways that they do things, and if you're going to use a distro, you have to kind of suffer through with them or use something different. CUDA programmer, go ahead. Don't forget to mute yourself. I'm going to assume he went AFK. So let's.
Here.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I noticed you guys are using the terms container, like Dockerize and Flatpak pretty often. You know, I actually came across a nice Docker container, which was for scientific simulations. And it got me thinking, how would I use CUDA to massively parallelize my code and put it into a Flatpak? Are you guys familiar with CUDA at all?
I don't use. It's an NVIDIA software, right?
I know what it is.
Well, it's more of a NVIDIA runtime, like an API directly to the GPU in order to massively parallelize your code, because you can use single instruction, multiple data quite easily. So, you know, you have the same calculation, you need to be running it. You can vectorize your data and then just run the calculations all at once. So basically, I need to somehow get that into a Flatpak.
I've never packaged.
Are you
Go ahead.
are you asking for help or advice or something?
Well, it's more like I was just wondering if you guys have ever used CUDA for like your Flatpaks. Like you guys have written Flatpaks, correct?
Probably the.
Oh, have you seen a llama? Like the AI, the local AI thing?
Wait,
for Linux?
can you repeat that? Like my apologies, my headset had some interference there.
Oh, no worries. So, have you seen Olama? OLLAMA? I don't know.
I think it's
I
how you
can't.
spell it. Yeah, it's like a local version of ChatGPT or something.
Okay. Oh, you mean llama or a
Yeah,
llama? You know, I think there's like two. I think there's like alpaca and then there's llama. You know, I think
yeah.
alpaca
So
was the first one.
the alpaca round no Flatpak has Rock'em, like the AMD CUDA pretty much. You can just use that. Like you can use the same ways on the Flatpak build.
Okay. I think I get what you're saying. Wait, I see a lot of here. Let's see. Okay, Tampa Joe knows exactly what he's on about. Like he uses CUDA, or he uses things that use CUDA. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to like. I noticed we were talking about Flatpaks for a while, and I just thought CUDA could be like a really interesting conversation. I was just hoping we would kind of have a bit more CUDA incorporation into here.
We're dealing in a Linux community. Finding people who use NVIDIA is going to be pretty. I mean, unless you're going to have them bitch about NVIDIA for a while.
Well, I mean, I guess there is the what's it called? There is the C++ sickle, which is a nice replacement for NVIDIA CUDA, but however, it just doesn't have the right speed that I'm looking for. Because I write very high speed C++ applications, so I can't just settle for anything.
I'm not a developer, so I have no clue what you're talking about.
Well,
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, well, sickle is like it's all it's almost stand-in, just almost. However, all these CUDA cores, they're very good for AI. However, I'm running very intense chemistry simulations. But if you guys want to talk about CUDA, just let me know.
Okay. RBM, go
Okay.
ahead.
So, I think my connection is maybe. Does my connection sound okay right now?
You sound fine, but you're in the red. But that's okay. You don't have a camera. They usually the audio usually comes through fine. If you have the camera on, then you'd be looking like an 8-bit character. But that happens.
All right.
So go ahead.
Well, so I do know that there are multiple ways to get to your NVIDIA GPU through containers. With a rootful Docker container, I know that you can just get straight to the, you can kind of pass through, kind of like you pass through a GPU to a VM. There are some settings that you can enable just in a Docker Compose and set up or with a Docker run command or whatever to be able to grab the NVIDIA device and use it inside your container. I've used it to play video games with the containerized Steam runtimes and stuff for like game stream servers and things. So I know that you can get to it that way. And there's also something called the NVIDIA Container Toolkit, which you can use. I believe that's a lot more common for people to try and get to their NVIDIA GPUs and containers for CUDA stuff more specifically. So I would look at the NVIDIA Container Toolkit probably about that.
Tampa Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, the packages I use. So I saw you must have saw what's in there. Those are all Windows programs that I'm using to do work, and yeah, they use CUDA, and I mean there's on a 4090 there's like 16,000 some odd cores essentially, and it can massively parallelize this workload. But I do know with Docker, you can run Plex, and you can, depending on your host OS, you can pass through your GPU for transcoding. And I'm assuming transcoding is maybe it's not using CUDA, maybe it is, but it's essentially passing the GPU through to the container itself. So I'm sure you can pretty much you create any programs that run in CUDA and have them work in a Docker. You just have to make sure that you pass that GPU through. Because I bet you there's at least a couple people in here using Plex passing a GPU through, and I know in Linux, the NVIDIA's it is very. My laptop's got an NVIDIA GPU, and I never use it because I don't like headaches. But you can have a NVIDIA GPU and use your iGPU for video and pass the NVIDIA GPU through to your Plex containers. So it does have that ability for you anyhow.
Okay. I'm gonna focus our attention back on containers a little bit. So earlier, Drew, I think it was you, Drew, that asked about our favorite containers and stuff. So um, one of them that's really surprised me that has become my favorite is Circs. Uh, my home lab was down a couple days while I was working on getting my new desk set up working, and I had to go back to Google, and it was painful how bad Google is. And it's not just like the results or whatever. It's just the feel of using Google made me feel slimy, and I'd been using Circs for so long that it just felt weird having to go back. So one of my favorite containers actually has become Circs. Having my own self-hosted search engine where I all the data is controlled on my server. It's behind a it's behind a firewall. All the data and stuff is encrypted as I can make it and stuff like that. It has been it's been a marvelous revelation, and it makes going back to a regular search engine just absolutely painful. George, it looks like you're next.
I just wanted to point out when it comes to favorite containers, if y'all just go to linuxserver.io, they have all the good stuff.
Yep.
It's amazing. That's all I wanted to
Yeah,
say.
whoever curates it is
Oh
really,
yeah, it's
really
good stuff.
Yeah. Mighty Spirit, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, I have here lying my old ThinkPad, and my plan for this winter is to turn him into my home lab. And when I was looking for some containers that I would like to have there, I discovered that you can actually use Circs together with Olama, and surprisingly, you don't need you don't need dedicated GPU at all, and your CPU doesn't have to be so powerful as I was afraid that it's gonna have to be. And then with this open web interface that ChatGPT uses, or directly plugged into Emacs or some other text editor, I hope that at the end of the winter, that's how it should be. Pretty straightforward to have your local AI that has direct access through Circs on the internet without anybody being able to build a portfolio of your AI searches. And I'm like, if this is really so easy as it sounds, that's cool.
That is cool. Drew, go ahead.
I have not used Circs, but I have used Hoogle, and I thought that was a really good one. And one of the other ones, and that I can't live without, is Fresh RSS, Matt.
Yeah, me too. Right there with you.
You know, when it comes right down to it, I really like Fresh RSS. It's probably, I think that's really the top two Docker containers that I will use. But I will say also, in terms of Flatpak, I forgot the one that I did use, and that is because I would like the newest version of Apostrophe, which is a markdown text editor. That's the only that's the only one I've used in the last several months. So those three things.
Okay. RBM, go ahead.
Oh, if you want to talk about some cool containers, have any of you ever seen the IT tools container? It is like 100 different neat little tools for using for probably developers like it the best, but like, convert your markdown to HTML back and forth, escape HTML. There's an emoji picker and like password strength checker, and it's just dozens and dozens and dozens of neat little tools in there for that. But also, Jellyfin is one of my favorite containers with a companion known as Jelly Seer and Jelly Stat. So you can keep track of all of your view statistics and manage, like, have a request platform to keep track of like what you want to have added to your media server. Those are great little tools to all have those combined together like that.
Good tips. Batman, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thinking back about Circs, I use I use this thing called I've been playing around with this thing called Perplexica, which is kind of like Perplexity, but self-hosted. They use to connect you connect your Circs instance to or a Circs instance through their Docker Compose file. It allows you to run local AI. I mean, like use Circs or like as an AI search engine like Perplexity.
That's cool. I didn't know that Cirx had the AI stuff at all. I haven't really looked into it because I don't use AI as much. When I do need to use AI, I just go to Chat GPT because I'm a loser. Um, Tulip, go ahead.
So, as you guys like are talking, like everyone seems to have a different setup here. Like there's one guy on OpenSUSE, someone is on Debian, and everything. And honestly, like this, I really like how universal these containers are. Like I can just, I don't care really about the host. I can just like run whatever kind of application I want or need, and this is really nice. Like, um, yeah, I think that's it actually.
Okay.
Like, oh yeah, no. You know the IT tools container that RPM mentioned? Like, I've never heard of it, but like, it's not anything like distro specific. I can just use it on like I don't know Arch or OpenSUSE or whatever. For example, the Kali container, the Kali Linux. Like I can just use the Kali tools on I don't know on Fedora if I wanted to, and that's really cool. That's a really nice feature. That's it.
Yeah. So I want to take this opportunity to rant about something that RBM said, the whole Jellyfin thing. So I'm a Plex user, but not really by choice. I wanted to use Jellyfin, but Jellyfin doesn't help you with transcoding at all. You have to set that stuff up manually because it doesn't really search. It doesn't, for whatever reason, it can't tell what your hardware is. At least as far as I can tell. And I was a complete utter noob, so I probably did something wrong. I'll freely admit it. But there's the whole drop down. You have to choose what brand you have and what's supported. And I was using it in a VM, so there was another layer of abstraction there. So maybe that's the reason why I was having problems. But I could not for the life of me get transcoding to work at all. And that meant that sometimes it took like 30 minutes for a movie to start playing. Like by that time, I no longer want to watch the movie. I've moved on to something else. My attention span is not that long. RBM?
Uh, I can I can solve that for you. I can fix all that for you if you want to make the transition to Jellyfin. I actually chose Jellyfin over Plex because I could tell it what I wanted to tell it. Again, I had like multiple GPUs to work with in this system that my Jellyfin lives on. It I don't want it to use the NVIDIA card, but it can. All I have to do is send that through and then choose NV encoder. But the Intel chip, it's like a I don't know 1200 something. It handles all of the hardware transcoding, but I can do one better. I actually run TDAR automatically across the entire library with both GPUs simultaneously so that I don't actually have to transcode in Jellyfin almost ever anymore. It's really cool.
Okay.
At least I think anyway.
Well, I might get together with you. You can help me, but I don't think that it's gonna because I run Proxmox, right? And then I
Mhm.
run Jellyfin in a VM in Docker container, and I don't pass through a GPU at all. The GPU that's in my home lab is just completely utter. It's just useless.
Yeah.
It's there to fill up a PCIe slot because the computer won't boot without a GPU slot, a GPU in it. Otherwise, it's not passed through. I'm actually pretty sure my home server doesn't even support was IOMMI or whatever the hell it is. It needs to be supported in order to pass stuff through. Um, so I'd have to do it without a GPU at all, which is probably another problem, right?
Yeah. So I actually chose Jellyfin because Plex locked the transcoding behind a paywall for my own hardware that I could already do transcoding with. So that's why I never went to Plex, even though it does have quite a nice interface.
Yeah. Well, but see, the interface really bugged me about Jellyfin there for a while, but then there's the custom CSS skins, and you can make it look however you want. So that stopped bothering me. It was just transcoding. I couldn't get past it. So yeah. GNU to Linux. Go ahead.
Okay, I use Plex on Linux Mint, and it works great. I have never once thought about transcoding. It's never been an issue. I have all kinds of videos of every type: MP4, WEBM, MKV, you name it. Stuff I've downloaded, stuff I've ripped from DVDs or whatever, and it just works. So I don't know why it just works without me having to do anything. I've never thought to myself, "Oh, it's not working. The transcoding fails." I don't know why. Maybe everything just works, and I guess I'm happy about it. That's it.
Yeah, Plex is like that, and that's the reason why I'm still there. Tulip, go ahead.
Hello. So I someone at some point talked about it being like slower, like Flatpaks or containers in general being slower than running it through the host. And I feel like I can talk about it a bit because like I always like mess around with random stuff in Linux, and one of these were namespaces, which are the building blocks to containers, right? And considering how namespaces work, like running something on a container is just as running it on your host. Like it doesn't like either Flatpak or Snaps or anything really shouldn't have any performance hit. Snaps do have a performance hit because of a bunch of stuff, but like it's really exactly the same. That's it. I just wanted to talk about
It
that.
might just be mental on my part, the whole slowness thing, but it feels like sometimes on first boot, right after you install something, it's a little slower. It's not as slow as Snap used to be, though. So maybe, like I said, maybe it's just mental on my part. RBM, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't speak to snaps specifically, but there there will always be a mild amount of accounting overhead to do namespacing and divide up the resources and share those appropriately. So, like it's technically true that some bits are going to run slower, but I think most of the impact of that is always going to be on startup. And most of the time, once you're in runtime, I don't think there's going to be that much impact left anymore because I think most of the accounting is all just done up front. So the overhead is mostly up front. And we've taken the work for most of that out of the computer and prepared it by the people. Like the way that we, operate is more conducive to this so that it's designed to be practically as fast as the host system. That's kind of the point of it, but there will always be a little bit of overhead.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I promised I'd avoid, but we probably should talk about is AppImages. So I've made a video on AppImages talking about how I hate it. That whole thing kind of went around the Linux community for a while and got a whole bunch of reaction videos, which is hilarious because someone reacting to my videos is just kind of funny. But um, my whole thing about AppImages isn't that they aren't good; it's just that they are mismanaged. Like the idea behind an AppImage where it's all like Flatpak wants to be all self-contained, but it's not because you have alternate dependencies and stuff that get installed along with it. So that's the reason why you have three mesas installed and three adwaitas things installed, right? AppImages actually are all containerized in together into a package, and you can actually transport those things. They're very portable. So the idea themselves is good. Mac OS does this, and they do it well. Like you install something, you can drag it to a folder, and it's installed. Right? That's the dream of AppImages, but it just never got followed through on until too late in the game, and that's always been my problem with AppImages. That if you want to launch them, basically, unless you use a ton of app images and get the tools to manage them, you're probably going to use them from the file manager. And to launch an application from a file manager just feels all sorts of wrong to me, and I don't want to do that. I know, like I do that for like one or two, like Vile for my keyboards. That's the only app image I have on my system, and I don't want to download the tools to install it properly or install it properly using like the command line or whatever. I just leave it in the file manager, and that bugs me to no end because I think Flatpaks could have been good if I could just say drag this thing once upon install to a certain folder and it works, right? And maybe that's something that can be done nowadays. I don't know, but for me, that's always been the problem with AppImages. Tulip, go ahead.
Also, yeah, about the images, if you want to have like a more integrated experience, funnily enough, there's a Flatpak that does that. It's called Gear Level.
That's great. I love that irony.
There's a Flatpak called Gear Leveler that does that for you. Like it just adds all the desktop stuff and whatever. It's pretty nice. But yeah, like also like honestly, I don't really like AppImages that much. Considering like I don't know, AppImages are really like everything that people say about Flatpak, like, oh you gotta install like a ton of runtimes and everything. Like you said actually. They are much more true for AppImages because they really do have everything in it. So, like, if you have 2 separate KDE applications, you gotta have every single library there, and they can also be kind of slower because of that. And honestly, like pro bono, like the guy that made AppImages,
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of stuck in the past.
He's very opinionated. That's true.
Yeah, that's it really.
Okay. GNU to Linux, go ahead.
I use a program called AppImage Launcher. I installed it through a PPA for Ubuntu, or in my case, Linux Mint, and it's very simple. All you have to do is put your few app images in one or more folders that you choose anywhere you want, and it integrates it right into the menu. So the first time you launch it. So after that, it will appear, if you click the so-called start button and then look, and it's in your menu, or in my case, even better, I like to use the keyboard. So I'm in the habit of typing the super key and the first couple letters of whatever program I want to launch. And it works the same for the app images, the same as it does for any other program installed here on Linux Mint. So there's no reason at all to have to, launch it from a file manager like a Neanderthal.
Well, if you are only going to use one like me, adding another one just to install the one I have doesn't make much sense. But also, it's great for a desktop environment user. Like if you're using Cinnamon or GNOME or whatever, XFC, it's going to work great. If you're in a window manager like me, Rofi doesn't accept anything that's not a traditional package without some tweaks. It will do it eventually, and like if you're going to use dmenu won't see an app image at all ever, as far as I know, or at least it used to. So more of a me problem, but it adds to my view of the whole thing. RBM, go ahead.
I hope AppImages or a successor to AppImages happens for sure. I think it'll be good to have. But I also, like for me personally, never had any value in and what AppImages provide, even before I had touched Linux ever. We had portable apps on Windows also, where you could just take your 7-zip and stick it on a USB drive, and it ran out of that USB drive and whatever computer you plugged it into, as long as it was Windows or whatever. And these things just like, it was always easier for me to just reacquire 7-zip than it was to try and carry around a portable app. So like, I just never understood the purpose of them. because the thing that made them valuable was that the whole thing was, including your data, was portable. Not just the application is portable, but your data.
RBM, are you still there? I think the AppImage guy assassinated him. Maybe. I don't know. All right. So, yeah, for me, I think that if I were to use them more, I would find my way around to actually getting them installed and workable for me. But because of my aversion to them, I haven't got there yet, or maybe I never will. Flatpaks just work better because I can just install them from the terminal. Uh, I can go search if I need to search for them. I can search for them from the terminal, or I can search from the in FlatHub on the web. And they work well for my workflow because of that. I can do it that way. And while they do, there is a central repository for AppImages now. There's like an AppImage store or something or the other that you can download. That's not something. That's something that you have to go hunt out. Whereas FlatHub is integrated into the vast majority of distros, or you can use snaps or whatever, and you have a built-in experience for that. Where AppImages, they don't have a distro sponsor, so you can't go. I mean, I think I've seen one distro. I have no clue what its name is that actually uses AppImages as the default way of getting packages. Um, couldn't tell you what Nitrix maybe. I may be just pulling that out of my ass. Um, but I think there's only one, and that's not enough to tilt the scales anywhere into getting people to actually use it. So, and also I don't think that the developers. Personality lends itself to people adopting his technology. So I don't know. So that's my AppImage thing. So Drew, you had a second question way earlier. Like how many was it? What you wanted to know how many containers we were using? Was that something that you asked?
I put it in a poll. I think we've gone
Pass that.
through.
Okay.
Yeah. And most people had, the majority of people had 7 or more Flatpaks installed on their machines. I do have one small question, since I am not a Flatpak user traditionally. If like, and I'm going to go back to our conversation during the podcast this past week, Matt. I use Tixis, or the terminal, as my nuggie of the week, and one of the things that I was using at the time was Debian testing, and it was in the Debian testing repos. But so I'm like, oh, I kind of like this. Let me try to use it. Well, I couldn't use it on Debian stable, so I had to install a Flatpak on my test machine that's using Debian stable. But it's using like over 360 megabytes of GNOME packages in order for it to run. Am I just being like way weird, that saying like, why does it have to install that much in order for it to work? I'm just putting that out there.
Well, Tixis is. I wouldn't be surprised if it's also installing things like DistroBox and Podman or maybe Docker in the background, because it has to use its own version, because that terminal is meant to be used with, or one of its chief features, I should say, is meant
Right.
is
Okay.
for those containers. So it probably includes all that stuff with it. Um, I don't know that for sure, but I'm assuming that it does. And the GNOME stuff is that's a Flatpak thing across the board. Like it's gonna, if it uses its own theme, or if it uses its own GNOME runtime or own version of Mesa, it's gonna come with that version installed as a Flatpak. Now it doesn't get included in the count, but if you do Flatpak list or whatever in your terminal, you'll be able to see everything that you have installed, even the ones that it doesn't count. And it can be like I have just, and pipe that into WC-L. So if I do like a fast fetch or whatever, it will tell me I have 34 Flatpaks installed. But if I do, well, it's not as bad. It's 35 if I do the Flatpak list. So there's a 1 point difference there. But I've seen that number be completely out of whack, whereas the list says I have like 50 and I really only have 34 because it doesn't count those dependencies. RBM.
Yeah. So no, Drew, you're not actually being that crazy. It does look like a lot, and it feels like a lot. It's very very heavy upfront. The upfront cost for storage specifically is pretty large for containerizing applications, especially for the desktop. Um, but it also, those are still shared dependencies as well, those like runtime dependencies and stuff. So like other containers that are similar to Tixis, it will share many of those dependencies in there. So like the next one won't be 300 megs again, it'll be 30 megs because it just needs its own little graphical GUI and its own application. The rest of it was provided by the runtime dependencies that are already in your system now. But then it looks weird because you'll have multiple versions of runtimes because some software uses the 41 runtime and some of it uses the 42 runtime. So it's going to look like a lot and it will be kind of a mess, but you actually have this same maze and spider web of dependencies that get lost inside your system with the traditional package manager. And I don't want to over explain how you arrive at that situation, but it's extremely common and you will practically never know about it unless you measure your disk usage frequently before and after package installations to track it. But you will end up in the same position with leftover dependencies that you're not still using if you like uninstall a package plenty of times. So it's not that different, but it certainly looks crazy up front.
I think when people see that and then they compare it to the promises of containers, it makes them confused because a container implies that it's all in a box together with everything, and that's not the way Flatpak works, right? Just not the way that at least not the way that it appears to work. So I think that AppImages does a better job of that. Snaps kind of does a better job of that. In terms of actually appearing to be a container than Flatpak does. But they all have the space problem as far as I'm aware, because that's just the way that it works. Because it includes all the it includes the dependencies, and even if they do share them, a lot of times they use dependencies that other containers aren't going to use. Tulip, go ahead.
So like the Flatpaks really need to be like that, because like if you try to use like the libraries on the host, you can really know what kind of dependencies you are going to get. Like, I don't know. Imagine I have Texas and the host has like num 40. It's not going to work because it's like super old and all the dependencies won't work. And also, like, you always have this space problem, like with anything. Like if you were to install Texas on Debian, like straight from the package, you would need all the GNOME dependencies too. Like the Flatpak just has these like runtimes and everything, but like they are all like deduped. They are like the system packages really. They're it's just a system on top of your system. That's it really.
I think the best example of the in a traditional package format example of that whole dependency thing is the like Pandoc or Xmonad, anything that downloads all the Haskell libraries. And then you want to install it, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of Haskell libraries left over that it didn't actually uninstall. For whatever reason, a lot of that stuff gets left behind. Same thing with a lot of Python libraries. Like if you download something that requires a lot of Python, you're gonna get a lot of libraries along with that probably. And then you uninstall it. Some of that stuff probably is not gonna go away. It's just gonna stay there forever and ever until you do a nuke and pave. RBM, go ahead.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Those a lot the most of the time the reason for those leftover dependencies is that they're technically soft dependencies for other packages that you also have installed on your system. Like you didn't originally install this dependency for that package over there, but but then it was a hard dependency of this next package. So now you have that dependency. And when you remove the second package, the first one's like, I can still borrow that, right? I can keep it, can't I? So your system is like, that's fine, sure. You have to explicitly tell it that you want to really clear those out. So it's really easy for that stuff to start to build up. And containers are really cool because you can actually make the decision at runtime or build time or any of this to share your resources as well. For example, with Nextcloud and Open Project, they both require databases like MySQL or MariaDB. And when you set them up, they're going to give you instructions to run with their own individual database that they'll connect to. But with containers, and this, you can just have the same MariaDB with two database tables in it, one for one for Nextcloud and one for what was the other thing? The Open Project. And you can share that one like instance of your database for both of those containers to like reduce like the size of them. And then once you start to do things like that, you start to understand that the containers that developers have been building most recently, they're getting better at this, but they're still building it in terms of traditional package systems. So they haven't actually like slimmed down their build systems and containers and dependencies for the Flatpak like builds. So they're still packing in too much stuff too. And it'll get better with time as they learn how to use the tools better and how to gauge the software and their dependencies for the build system.
Well, and it's not of containers that problem of them packaging everything under the sun is not a container developer specific problem. Like if you install on some distros, for example, you can download like Thunar, and you get actually no, it was Nemo. Actually, you download Nemo, the file manager, and you get Cinnamon along with it on some distros. Like it's attached to it. If you download Thunar, you get XFCE. If you download Nautilus, you'll get GNOME, the actual session of GNOME along with it. Unless I think it's actually OpenSUSE that did this for a while. Then you would have to tell it explicitly not to do that. Otherwise, it's going to give you everything, even though all you wanted was the file manager. RBM.
Yeah, there's this additional problem stacked on top too of developers having to vendor their own dependencies by copying the code from their dependency and putting it into their repository. And they just maintain a copy of that periodically in their source repository in order to provide that dependency for their application, which is like that is going outside the bounds of your package manager and the dependency system that it's already resolving for you, because they can't rely on the package systems to do these things right. So what they'll do instead is they'll take the package dependency out and they'll just grab the software, the parts of the software, the libraries that they need. They'll just pluck that from the source repository and vendor it in their own repository to solve that problem for end users. And it's nice of them to do that, but it also means that you suddenly have 10 different copies of the same like header files.
Well, I mean, theoretically, the Linux kernel's not any better. No distros really do old kernels very well. A lot of times you'll end up with older kernels there, kernel headers and stuff like you're saying, and just in the background that just stay there forever and ever. And if you want to clean those stuff up, that has to be something you have to do manually. All right, so the last thing that we just go around the horn, which container, if you were to bet what containerized format in terms of Flatpaks versus snaps is going to quote unquote win, or if you want to argue that one has already won, you can do that. Put in your vote for who is going to win. We'll just go around to whoever wants to talk, and then we'll end it for tonight. Anybody want to give a vote? RBM, go ahead.
I think it's very clear that general adoption will be Flatpak, and snaps are going to stay in the Ubuntu ecosystem. And I think even more Ubuntu-based distributions or spins or derivatives are going to step away from Ubuntu. They're going to take up Flatpaks, and they're going to possibly do like Linux Mint and build a Debian edition. And then I think they're just going to all leave Ubuntu behind eventually instead. And I think Snap is going to be most of the reason for that, actually.
Interesting. Drew?
Yeah, what he said, and I think it's already happened. Basically,
Yeah.
I think it's a foregone conclusion. Even though I will say this, even though when I'm using Ubuntu server, sometimes it's actually kind of nice to use a snap just to get something installed really quickly on Ubuntu server. But overall, yeah, I'm in full agreement.
Yep. Anybody else want to put in a vote or a comment on this? Mighty Spirit?
Yeah, I mean, Flatpak totally won the battle a long time ago. Yeah, but I think it's a little bit sad with Ubuntu. I saw some interview with Mark Shuttleworth, and I would swear that he actually cared about Linux desktop, because it didn't sound like just a corporate talk, like him putting some kind of PR out there. But I think they just messed up with the snap, and but they stay in the server, and who knows, maybe Ubuntu will still do something nice with desktop. I would hope so.
Yeah. Tulip, go ahead.
Yeah, pretty much everything that I would like to say was already said. And Flatpaks forever. Even Rel is gonna use Flatpak, so they are gonna push it very hard onto everyone. So everyone is gonna use Flatpak.
Because where Red Hat goes, the rest of us follow. All right, I think that's where we'll end. We made it almost a good 2 hours, so we'll go ahead and end it there. Thanks everybody for joining us, whether you participated or just watched in the live stream or wherever. Thank you so much for joining us on our last lug of the year. We won't be back until January, so hope everyone who celebrates a holiday this time of year has a happy holiday and all that stuff. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for participating. We'll see y'all next time.